You have discovered the mountain. You have created the mountain. And you will be experiencing a high degree of freedom in these days through these talks. We have some dangerous new ideas to discuss. You all have passed exam 370, my Sagaxi. And this, up here on the mountain, will be a major turning point in our future consciousness. So let me start with the first big new idea. But before I do that, I need to give you a little context. Because it was thanks to Nietzsche in the 1880s that the death of God came to Western consciousness. For Nietzsche, it was a good thing. This judgmental, moralistic, omnipresent, omniscient spider god had held humanity down for too long. For Nietzsche, it was a myth. It was a fiction, and he wanted it dead. Because only the last men, only the nihilists, could continue to believe the fiction. And for many years, Western culture, though they could not ignore many of the things that Nietzsche said, they ignored the death of God until the 1960s, when Thomas J.J. Altizer courageously brought back the notion of the death of God, based on Nietzsche, based on William Blake. And he got a lot of publicity, and he got a lot of hate. And I was fortunate at that time, as a graduate student, to discuss with him what the death of God meant. And for him, it was a form of Christology. And again, in his great honor, he subtracted the metaphysical from the death of God. There is no heaven. Everything is imminent. And though we disagreed quite pointedly on the fact that I was doing theology without faith, and he felt he had to continue within the Christian tradition, we understood each other, and I went my way. After many years of wandering and working and teaching, in 2005, I discovered, I created a revaluation of radical theology of the death of God. I discovered the infant God. Now you've all heard of this, because the concept of the infant God has been a part of my poetry, has been a part of our films, our TV series, Carlos Now. An integral part. And it has meant a complete revaluation of what the term God means. How can God be an infant? And in our explorations found some unusual things. First, I found the infant God was surrounded by a golden sphere of meditating rishis who were basking in God's infantile self-love, thinking that God loved them. And that can be extended throughout other religions in the West as well. Yes, it has been a complete revaluation, because the infant God is unaware and oblivious to you, to your actions, to your thoughts. There is no judgment, there is no atonement. There is no salvation, and there is no necessity or requirement for faith. There is only perception and observation and experience. So for about 15 years, we have been talking the infant God. And we understand and have understood that the infant God is only interested in those minds that can bring him to new powers and new knowledge and new growth. And yet something very dramatic is happening as we speak today. The golden sphere of rishis is gone. We feel a tremendous excitement for adventure and new experiences. We feel the first sounds, the first attempts at communication. And yes, here on the mountain, to you are the first to hear that there is a transition occurring. There is a developmental, evolutionary leap. Perhaps, just perhaps, God is no longer an infant and is becoming a child. And as the God becoming a child requires new attention and new guidance, we can celebrate one thing. We can celebrate possibly the fact that our perceptions, our conceptions, our explorations have accelerated this process, that the perception and attention of our will on the will of the infant God has in fact raised the God into childhood. And for that, we can all be proud. It will require tremendous new responsibilities. It also means that the radical theology that began in the death of God and continued in the infant God now must open itself to new conjectures and new experiences and new confirmations of what it means to be in contact with the child God. Since Neolithic times, it appears that man has always been concerned and speaking about the soul. The Egyptians had elaborate practices for the soul after death. Hindus believed that your actions in a previous incarnation would determine your present and future incarnation. And even Socrates would speak of the care of the soul. And today, up here, because you are such great minds, I can tell you, the soul that they are talking about has always been simply a literary device, a fiction, something hypothesized outside the body, some other mystic other realm to somehow take the sting of death away. Now, of course, for the great masses of Neanderthals and Homo sapiens arose a small group of priests who could profit by the proposition of a soul, by the feeding and caring and, yes, trading of the soul. In our literature, the bargain, the struggle with Satan for the Christian soul was paramount. People needed to have their sins forgiven for their soul to rise to heaven. But yes, a mistake. A perfectly understandable mistake, people, from the caveman to the last men that we see around us. The last men that Nietzsche spoke of. These nihilists who cling to their faith. Cling even more to this fiction of the soul. As if it was some divine province that everyone had access to, that everyone could trade up for. But we needn't concentrate too much time on this incredible blunder, because even if the term has been mistaken, we can change all of that right now. In fact, now that you have passed exam 370 and you know yourselves better and deeper than any individual has known him or herself since the beginning of recorded history of man, you are the ones, by raising your will, can create the first generation of true souls. And what do we mean by that? Aren't we just repeating a fiction, perhaps replacing a literary device with a cinematic device? No, it's deeper than that. Because those who understand the theory of the three wills, those who have raised their own individual will, needn't follow rules, beliefs, ceremonies, hoping for a continuation of their selfhood. No. They can raise their will through their powerful manipulation of space and time. they can continue your soul here on Nair and on other planets, in our galaxy and in other galaxies. Choose your partners well, choose your, among the Druids, you will see here on Nair where your soul will lead. And it can be genetic and it can be non-genetic, because in the schools you will be determining your continuation here on this lovely planet. The more interesting challenge will be, now that you are the first generation of souls, to spread those souls out into other planets, other biological systems, and perhaps even non-biological systems. How entrancing, how exciting it will be for you, my Sagaxi, to be continuing time after time after time, every new life a new adventure, and not because you believed in something, in some prophecy or some rule or some God. No. Because you have made it yourself. You have created that continuation of yourself, yourself. Your souls, your will to will continues open-endedly. There is no particular cessation of this movement, because you will gain power and insight with each new iteration. Take this news at heart. You can ignore everything that has ever been said about the soul, because you have the responsibility of creating not only the definition of the soul, the action of the soul, but all of the functions and beauties of all the souls to come. My Sagaxi, as the most exemplary individuals of the Western Way, it is important, no, it's necessary, for you to understand the Eastern Way as well. And the Eastern Way, to understand it, the self, the universe, and the connection between the two, is through meditation. In Eastern meditation, you go back before the mind, before the passion, before the desire, before perhaps even this lifetime. In the meditation we invented at the Western Way Institute in 2011. We introduced technology based on earlier work of Nick Nelson that did not lead to quietism, that led, in fact, to a greater understanding and expansion of self. Yes, the first phase of our Western way of meditation was to empty all of those thoughts and pressures and emotions and sensations that are coming from the outside world. You could almost think of them as the effects of other wills upon you. The wills of your ancestors, the wills of your clan, the wills of your peer group, your superiors at work, whatever. Once you get these out of your mind, then you can see yourself. But the key element of the V-domes is that once those are emptied, you can fill the void with more precise and more powerful selfhood. It is a means of cleansing, of expanding, because we accrete other wills as we accrete viruses and bacteria through daily life. And we need a way to cleanse ourselves, and that is what the Western meditation does. It started with the V-Dome Omicron. And through meditation and the raising of the will, it turns out that you can foresee your actions in the future. You can eliminate mistakes of the past through the function of a greater self. And so the distinction between the Eastern way of meditation and the Western way of meditation is that the Eastern way leads to quietism. It leads to a form of bliss that is not connected to the self. It is connected to something before the self, to a God that doesn't exist, to a universe that doesn't exist. It is the path to nothingness. And yes, could that be considered second will? Is that the will to self-annihilation? Yes, it can be. And it cannot be eradicated, and it should not be eradicated. The Eastern way of meditation is extremely useful, particularly in context with the Western way. And we have recently introduced a beautiful new technology called Asmi. And through Asmi, everything happens 1,000 times faster. 1,000 times faster. You want to see your development 1,000 iterations in the future, you can see it, you can do it. You can use Asmi as a way of extending your soul into whatever future, whatever environment that you wish. Asmi creates empty time. In empty time, there is all distance. With Asmi, in meditation, you can travel throughout the universe. There is no hindrance of distance. This is all your mind and yourself and your projected will. So we are thankful to the Eastern Masters. We have the technology that reverses that intuition, that reverses that direction. Because ultimately, what do the Eastern Masters want? They want bliss, they want nirvana, they want to bask in what they think of as love. my Sagaxi, we are not interested in the happiness of self-annihilation. No. Our happiness comes when our power is growing. Our happiness comes when our imagination is richer. Our imagination comes when our words and directions are finer. And meditation helps you magnify everything that yourself is and can be. My Sagaxi, we've been having such great discussions, brainstorming sessions, theater, music, on these topics that we've been discussing up here on the mountain. I've heard such great things about what we can do with the child God, what we can do as the first generation of soul, how we can use Asmi to expand our will throughout the universe. And now we come to a very adventurous element, the city of Athenapolis, and that is our exploration. We use the V-domes, Asmi, to explore the physical universe, everything that's out there. And what we found is that what astrophysicists call the filaments are the basic structure of our physical universe. They're massive. They're like roots of a sequoia tree, deep and wide throughout the universe. Yes. And these filaments also have the morphology of the human brain. We are very interested in finding out why that is. As explorers, you have some privileges and some responsibilities. The first privilege is that the filament that you find, the filament that you create, and finding that spread of hydrogen gas surrounded by dark matter. You can name it. It will carry your name forever. The second interesting element of the exploration is that we have instigated a project some years ago about building out the brain of God. To do that, you need to build a synapse in whatever manner or definition you see fit on the filament that you have claimed. And should you and you shall find other intelligences out there, then you can connect them with the network using God's brain. This, my Sagaxi, is a very daunting task. Our human brain has perhaps a billion connections, almost the same amount of stars, but the number of filaments is far less. As explorers, you have the opportunity to go outside the universe. We have been outside, and we have pictures of outside. And when you go outside, you may find something new and exciting. And as explorers, you can give a name to that universe as well. Part of your duties as explorers is, of course, your logbook. You will be expected to bring back to Athenapolis everything that you see. Because you are our eyes. You are our bodies. You are our minds encountering beings and other minds, perhaps stranger than any science fiction. Because you will be taking chances in the confidence of your expanded self. You will find that there are no malevolent beings out there. You have cleansed them all before you even arrive. And yet, there are gravities. There are black holes. There are physical obstacles that may entangle your mind. So you do have certain privileges and responsibilities. But as explorers, you carry all of our hope, all of our excitement into the future. Because you will be utilizing everything we know about soul, everything we know about mind, to keep your quest going, to keep everything exciting and new. My Sagaxi, we've had a marvelous time up on the mountain. You discovered the mountain, you created the mountain. Perhaps you created me. We'll see. It is important, in the midst of all these new ideas, to set goals. To set those goals that are appropriate in raising the will, raising our consciousness. Our first priority has been the cessation of war and hunger and savagery on the planet Naya. Thanks to the success of the restoration that appears to be successful. Part of our goal setting must include, however, the constant monitoring of the four classes, the constant improvement of communication, the constant implementation of peace. And when it comes to the child God, we have some very interesting goals. Because the first part of the interesting goal will be to experience all of the universe as if we were showing it to God. As if our will was aligned completely with the will of God. And yet, there is something out there. If we take a long view of time, we are not happy seeing God, our universe, continue into an endless heat death of perhaps 1 billion trillion years of degradation and chill. No. I think with our guidance, we have proven we can accelerate the growth of God. We can bring him to maturity. And at that point in which he is the most beautiful and attractive universe, we will arrange a collision with his mate, with his other, so that there is a beautiful explosion, a wonderful union, and a new beginning of time. Now, our goals for meditation are perhaps easier to come by. We need perhaps better devices. We need perhaps better growth in our own organ of the brain. That is a goal. It's quite doable. In our 22,000 years of Athenapolis that we have been vouchsafed. Once our wills are aligned with God, everything is exciting and real. For explorations, clearly, to identify the other universe will be our prime goal. And for those who think that happiness is a goal, we say, no. We prefer to continue our work, to continue our growth. Our happiness is the next invention. Our happiness is the next poem. Our goal is ever higher. Our goal is ever higher. And the highest freedom is when we create new goals and new ideas. My Sagaxi, as I suspected, in our discussions after these talks, you came up with better ideas than I presented you with. That's the whole idea. Let's do this again next year. Same mountain, same time.